and welcome to the Unitarian Church of Evanston. I'm Melanie Kitchener, this morning's worship associate, and I want to welcome our guest preacher, Reverend John Coffey, who is with the Meadville Lombard Theological School. Whether this is your spiritual home or you are newly discovering our community, we are glad you are with us. We are an inclusive and welcoming community, seeking truth in love and striving to nurture the human spirit for a world made whole. We are guided by our principles and values, which remind us in every moment and through every challenge that each of us is worthy of love, and that we are all connected through the vast and beautiful web of existence. We come together to remember our kinship with one another and to hold one another in heart and mind with tenderness and careful attention. If you're joining us online, there are many links of connection in the description below the YouTube live stream, including the order of service credits, ways to support our mission, and how to be added to our email newsletter list. If you're here in the sanctuary, we encourage you to use the QR code, which is found on the hymnal carts, for the digital order of service, or to take one of the large print orders of service we have on the table near the sanctuary doors. There are listening assistance devices there as well. Hymnals are available for anyone to use. John Siegel is here to chat with us to let us know that our hearing loop has been installed. John Siegel is responsible for me having telecoil in my hearing aids. Please, come up.
Thank you, Melanie. When Alma Woods asked me if I was willing to serve on the Accessibility and Inclusion team, it was because she knew I was on the faculty in audiology at Northwestern University. And in our deliberations as a committee, one of the topics that arose fairly quickly is what to do about people with hearing impairment. And the solution that in our field for people who are wearing hearing aids that seems to work really well to deal with problems with room acoustics is to use an induction loop system, which couples electromagnetically the signal directly from the microphone here to the hearing aid by means of what's called a T-coil inside the hearing aid. If your hearing aid is enabled with a T-coil, then it picks up the electromagnetic signal anywhere you sit in the sanctuary or in the choir area. We have two loops that accomplish that. And the advantage of the loop over just straight amplification is that it takes advantage of the particular hearing aid and the fitting that you received when you had your hearing aid. It's not just straight amplification. And it performs remarkably well. It's something that's widely standardized and available in places like theaters or subway stops or whatever, and it's enormous improvement in intelligibility even in noisy environments. Okay, like a subway station, for example. So we put together a proposal after a lot of talk about what to do to be included in the capital campaign. And because the capital campaign was successful, we raised enough money to include the loop system. And I became the, yes, give ourselves a hand. That's important because we really want to make sure that anyone, as the accessibility team, anyone who has any impairment that lessens their ability to participate fully in the life of the church is something we need to be able to deal with, and we've been doing that. Okay. So having raised the funds, we finally got the go-ahead to hire a company to install the loop system. And the company that was selected, submitted a good bid, was Thunder Hearing and Sound. Okay, now Thunder is a really nice name for a company that helps people hear. but it's actually the names of Megan and Steve Thunder, who own the company. So it's very clever. And they managed to install this thing with minimal disruption of the building. They actually installed the loop on the ceiling underneath the slab here in the basement level, and then a second loop here underneath the choir. Okay, so the really nice thing, one of the really nice things about it is that it obviates the need for someone to pick up one of the hearing assist receivers that we used to have. People can walk in. They should see signage which needs to go up that has a standardized loop icon to indicate that we have one. They should know that it's here in the sanctuary, and just enable their hearing aid. Just, there's a lot of people are a little sensitive to being seen as someone who needs a hearing aid. It's just a fact. It's why hearing aid use is not nearly what it might be otherwise. So this allows people, even people who are visiting, especially people who are visiting for the first time, to walk in, to know that we are, yes, I think we have a visitor here. And is it working? Excellent. Yay. That's what I wanted to hear. Yeah, so somebody can come in and without waiting for the announcement to say, oh, by the way, you could pick up a thing by the door, but they're already here and they're in the service. So, and this is also something that any organization that rents the church for a special purpose, as long as the sound system is on, they'll also be able to offer that for their clients as well. I'd be happy to answer questions anyone has. I'm still being very careful about COVID, and so I don't want to hang around too much after the service. But if you have questions, please send me an email. It's either on Realm or you can just write it down. It's jhsiegel@comcast.net. Thank you very much, and enjoy.
Yeah, when I was getting my aid, John said, don't get it unless you know you've got a T-coil. So thank you for that advice. As we begin our service, those joining us online are invited to gather your chalice and join us in beloved community.
Good morning. It is a joy to be here with you this morning. My name is John Coffey. I'm a minister based in Knoxville, Tennessee, where I live and work remotely for Meadville Lombard here in Chicago. So Chicago has a very close part to my heart, but in particular, Evanston does as well. It was, 5 years ago, 6 years ago now, Reverend Susan, that y'all hosted the Continental Gathering of UU seminarians while I was still a student at Meadville. And that was a very fun time held right in this sanctuary. That was the last time I was here, so it's a joy to be joining you all here this morning. I want to open with a reading from Lisa Friedman called Fragments. Spirit of life and love, we live in a fragmented world that tempts us to despair. We would put it back together piece by piece if it were ours to choose. But sometimes those fragments are enough. In a world of cruelty, there is still power in every act of kindness. In a time of doubt, there is still power in every act of hope. In an age of division, there is still power in every act of unity. May we remember that sometimes those fragments of meaning that we make are just the right size to hold in our hands and hearts. And with that, I welcome you to worship.
The Unitarian Church of Evanston resides on the traditional homelands of the Council of Three Fires, the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations. This land was recorded as being transferred from the local Potawatomi community to the U.S. government in 1829, and then was sold to the white settlers after decades of violent encroachment by the French, British, and then U.S. American settlers. The Potawatomi community had no choice but to sell before they were forcibly moved west of the Mississippi River. The Chicagoland area is now home to one of the largest and most diverse urban Native communities in the United States. Our faith calls us to name these realities with honor and respect as one small effort toward finding greater accountability, deeper relationship, and mutually with contemporary indigenous communities, for the land which we use as a sacred space, for the animals and plants that have sustained by this land, and for our ancestors and descendants who are and will become part of the earth. As we light our chalice, symbol of our living tradition, please join in reading We Pause This Morning by Marta Valentine. The words are now will be on the screen. Soon will be on the screen. They're on the screen. We pause this morning from the chaos of the world to reclaim the beauty within these walls that carry us through the week. We lift this community onto our shoulders with pride and grace-filled expectations for our children and our children's children. Please rise and join in saying the words of our covenant. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Now remain standing. Before we sing our opening hymn, let's turn to one another briefly to say good morning. Try to greet someone sitting near you, but who you don't really know yet.
Please remain standing if you prefer, or rise in body and spirit, and join us in our hymn, number 128, For All That Is Our Life. Today's Time for All Ages is Say Something by Peter H. Reynolds. And it's about sharing your voice at various times that we all can do one way or another. The world needs your voice. Mine? Yours, yes. Go ahead. It doesn't need to be perfect as long as it's from your heart. You don't have to be loud. Powerful words can be a whisper. You can say something in so many ways, with words, with action, with creativity. If you see someone lonely, say something by just being there for them. If you see an empty canvas, say something with your brush. If you see an empty lot, say something by planting a seed and watching it bloom. If you see someone being hurt, say something by being brave. Hey, stop! Someone's stepping in there. If you see something beautiful, say something with a poem. If you have a brilliant idea, say something with confidence. Eureka! If you want to show the world who you are, say something with style. Ta-da! And if you are angry, say something to help people understand. You made me feel invisible, and that really hurt. I'm really sorry. If you see an injustice, say something peacefully. Inspire others to do the same. Sometimes you'll say something and no one will be listening. But keep saying what is in your heart, and you will find someone who listens. And then keep saying it, and you may be surprised to find the whole world listen. If you are grateful for being alive, quietly say something to the stars, to the universe. Some people find it easier to say something than others, but everyone has something to say. So when you are ready, say something. Amen. Amen. Blessed be. Right on cue, awesome. And the author added this page, that your voice can inspire, heal, and transform. Your voice can change the world. Are you ready to say something? Yes. Amen. And rise in body or spirit to join this light of mine, number 118.
Amen. Whew. After that excitement, it feels I need a better transition into joys and sorrows. It was a joy, yeah, so maybe it was a good transition. Each Sunday, we hold space for the joys and sorrows of those gathered here, honoring the struggles and the triumphs, the brokenness and the wholeness that is woven into the human experience. If you have a joy or a sorrow you would like spoken aloud, you may write it in the Joys or Sorrows book at the back of the sanctuary. You may submit it through the Google Doc, through the Google form found on our homepage of our website, or you may email it to one of the ministers. If you enter a joy or sorrow into the live stream chat, it will be shared with the community through Realm. These are the joys and sorrows that have been shared before our service this morning. From Evie LaPecca, I express sorrow over the departure of a colleague who was a great leader and mentor. May she know that she made a big impact and will be dearly missed. From Sarah Vanderwicken, it is getting almost too much to bear. 2 days ago, Servando Ramos and his 7-year-old daughter were playing and walking in the park by the recycling center when he was shot multiple times and killed. How can we allow this to go on and on and on, Sarah writes. From Barb Seyfried, from Barb Seyfried, I hope I'm saying that right. Bob Seyfried had hip replacement surgery last week, and thankfully all went well during the surgery. He is home healing and continuing physical therapy to help with his recovery. And my husband's a physical therapist, so listen to those physical therapy people. This sacred space of our tender offerings is part of the practice of beloved community. Together we expand our celebrations and lessen the burden of our grief. At this time, folks gathered here are invited to come forward and light a candle for joys or sorrows on your heart. For this morning's prayer and meditation, I'm sharing a reading or a meditation that I wrote in the days before COVID. And this is the first time I'm leading this meditation since the COVID pandemic started. And earlier this year, I was hospitalized because of complications from post-COVID. And so this meditation on heartbeat holds a very special place for me. And so in that spirit of prayer and meditation, I invite you to join me this morning. I want you to find your heartbeat. Maybe you find it in your wrist. Maybe you find it in your neck. If you're like me and you get a little nervous sometimes when you're speaking in front of people, you might find it if you just sit still. If none of those places work, you might feel it in your chest. But I invite you in this moment to find your heartbeat. Take a few seconds to just become aware of it. Don't try to change it or slow it down. It's fine just like it is. I invite you to close your eyes if it helps, or you can keep them open. But as you find your heartbeat, note the rhythm, the pace, the beat, keeping time with your life. At this time in the world when so much seems uncertain, your heart sang its sure cadence as you rose out of bed this morning. And it will hum its downbeat in the evening tonight when you lay down to sleep. Throughout the stresses and excitements of the day and the rest and calm of night, this is the meter of your heart and soul. The rhythm you feel now has been with you your whole life. It has been with you through great joy and through great sorrow. It has been the baseline of laughter and kept tempo with anger. This beating, bouncing life through your veins has kept time since the days of your childhood, and this drumming and strumming of your life keeps time now. It will keep time with you all the days of your life. In those moments when you need it, this cadence will be there. When you find yourself overwhelmed by the rise and fall of life, take a moment to find the rise and fall of this rhythm of life that beats just for you. We'll take a few moments of silence to appreciate it. Returning from our silence, may the joys and sorrows of this community, the joys and sorrows in our hearts, may those be echoed in the words of the poet Jan Richardson, who writes, "Perhaps for now, it can be enough to simply marvel at the mystery of how a heart can go on beating, as if it were made for precisely this, as if it knows the only cure for love is more of it." In that spirit, I invite you to rise, embody your spirit, and join in our sung response, number 1002, "Comfort Me."
As we say in our covenant each Sunday, service is our law. UCE is called by our mission, values, and principles to contribute to our community, to form accountable partnerships, and to express gratitude through giving. Today's offering will be shared with Moran Center for Youth Advocacy, which is dismantling the school-to-prison pipeline with a lifeline of innovative, holistic, legal, and social work programs. If you're joining from home or in the building, you may text to give, mail in a check, or give from our website. If you write a check, please indicate in the memo line if your check is for shared offering, pledge, capital campaign, my favorite, music, or for some other giving. If you are in the sanctuary, the ushers will pass the collection bowls down the aisles. Will the ushers please come forward? Please give as generously as you are able, and may what you give bring you joy. Our reading is To Be of Use by Marge Piercy. The people I love the best jump into work headfirst without dallying in the shadows and swim off with sure strokes, almost out of sight. They seem to become natives of that element, the black, sleek heads of seals bouncing like half-submerged balls. I love people who harness themselves, an ox to an heavy cart, who pull like water buffalo with massive patience, who strain in the mud and the muck to move things forward, who do what has to be done again and again. I want to be with people who submerge in the task, who go into the fields to harvest and work in a row and pass the bags along, who are not parlor generals and field deserters, but move in a common rhythm when the food must come in or the fire be put out. The work of the world is common as mud. Botched, it smears the hand, crumbles to dust. But the thing worth doing, well done, has a shape and satisfies, clean and evident. Greek emphasis for wine or oil, Hopi vases that held corn are put in museums, but you know they were made to be used. The pitcher cries for water to carry and a person for work that is real.
I hope you'll indulge me, but I have a story that's not part of the original sermon, but it was inspired by a conversation with Reverend Susan at the beginning of the service, and then also by our story for all ages, where the person is called to say something. And it's a time where someone put a bullhorn in my hand and said, "Say something." It was the day that my husband and I were married. In 2015, on June 26th, day one of the Supreme Court overturning and granting everyone the right to marriage. Keith and I, through a series of not unfortunate, but definitely wacky events, ended up being the first couple in Knoxville to be married, possibly in the state of Tennessee. It was exciting. Yeah, it was wonderful. And it felt like this. And we showed up to a rally that night, and we were sitting in the back, and the mayor of Knoxville came up and grabbed us by the arm and pulled us on stage and handed me a bullhorn and said, "Say something." And in what I ultimately think was, in my theology, the voice of the Holy Spirit, I brought the microphone up to my mouth and I said the only thing that could possibly pop in my mind in the moment unscripted. I said, Knoxville, I would like to introduce you to my husband, Keith. That was perhaps one of the happiest moments of my life. And hi, Keith. He's watching from home this morning. Everybody's waving to you. I don't know if you can see them or not. Thank y'all. Y'all are wonderful sports. I appreciate it. But the conversation this morning before the service with Reverend Susan was about the current political climate. And in the context of the stripping away of a fundamental right to life-saving reproductive access to life-saving reproductive health care, a modern-day Supreme Court decision seems in stark contrast to that Supreme Court decision almost 7 years ago. My husband Keith once jokingly told me recently that I should introduce myself by saying, "Hi, I'm John, and I'm sorry." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Just get it out of the way." I said, "What?" He says, "You apologize too much." I said, "Do I?" He said, "Yeah, you do." To which I replied, "Oh, sorry." According to my husband and myself, if I'm being honest, I have a bad habit of taking the weight of the world on my shoulders, assuming everything is either my responsibility, my fault for the way it is, or my responsibility, my fault for fixing it. I tend not to just take on some of those feelings, I tend to take them all on. Most of the time, this is just annoying. Other times, it's simply overwhelming. And I wonder if you can identify with this. Sometimes when the world feels so overwhelming, some days just getting out of bed is difficult. Some days just showering is difficult. Some days just eating toast is difficult. I want to talk about two recent difficult experiences I had. One related to my hospitalization from COVID, and one related to the recent loss of our dear pet cat, Cookie. I'll start with COVID. Back in February, I contracted COVID for the first time. I've had it once since then. My symptoms were bad, and I was out sick for about a week, but I made what I thought was a full recovery, and I was doing better for several weeks. I run and walk about 2 miles every morning, and I was back to normal within no time. A couple more weeks went by, and I noticed that sometimes when I ran, my chest started to burn. Less than 1 week later, I couldn't get up from my desk and go to the kitchen without feeling completely out of breath. And because of the way the world is right now, this is the way that COVID has broken our perceptions of reality. I thought, I'm just overwhelmed, I'm just tired. But Keith told me, this is not normal. You should go to the doctor. To make a long story short, I went to the doctor, was rushed to the emergency room, where it was discovered that I had blood clots in both lungs. I was hospitalized for 24 hours, given treatment, and within a week, I was back to normal. I'm on blood thinners now for what we assume is going to be a year, but that's just a best guess. The doctor said normally someone my age is on blood thinners for about 6 months and then they can come off them. But that is for medical procedures, medical diagnoses that we know about, that we know the mechanism for. But COVID, despite being here for 2.5 years now, is still new in so many realms for so many people. So the doctor said, I don't know if you'll have to be on blood thinners for the rest of your life. I hope not. But every day as I take that pill, I'm reminded of just how difficult the world is sometimes. But I'm lucky that I have people in my life like my husband Keith who can remind me that sometimes the sum that you can do when you can't do it all is a little bit of self-care. In those times, there might be something you can do even when you can't do everything. I saw a lot of head nods when I asked if sometimes you feel this way, and I'm here to tell you that sometimes, even when the world feels so overwhelming, when literally it takes your breath away, that there is always something you can do, no matter how small, even if it is only for yourself. Now, last week, Keith and I were at home on a staycation after we had to cancel a trip to visit family because of another round of COVID. It's been a couple weeks. I'm not contagious, so no worries. But being homesick was frustrating and disappointing. That was hard enough. But Wednesday night of that week, when we were getting ready for bed, we found our pet Cookie curled up in her favorite spot, and she had passed away, suddenly and unexpectedly, and it felt like the world had taken one more thing from us. Cookie had been a part of our life for over 8 years. She was a dear, sweet thing who would walk into a room, take a look at everything going on, and then just flop over and take a nap. But Cookie taught me some things about what could be done when the world was overwhelming. Cookie had a special gift of sharing some of her Umwelt, which is a word I didn't even know until yesterday. As I was driving up from Tennessee yesterday, I was listening to a podcast interview with Ed Young and Liz Neely, who, among many other things and many other credentials, are experts in the communication of science. They specialize in the study of how science is communicated. And Young is currently writing a new book centered on the idea of Umwelt, which is U-M-W-E-L-T. The idea goes something like this. The world, and if we just take this sanctuary, is so full of stimuli, lights, colors, sounds, feels, smells, tastes. The world is so full of stimuli that we can perceive with our senses. And it goes beyond the basic 5. We can interpret things like temperature and comfort or discomfort. We can sense all of these things. We can feel the weight of gravity. Humans have in them built sensors that help them perceive the world. This is part of our Umwelt. But what we know about the observable universe is that there are so many other stimuli out there that humans can't perceive. There are things that other animals, other creatures, other beings in this world can perceive that we can't. For example, you take our eyes. The human eye has about 4 different types of photoreceptors that allows us to interpret brightness of light, color, distance, those types of things. The mantis shrimp that lives at the bottom of the ocean has 16. What does a mantis shrimp do with 16 photoreceptors in its little bitty eye living at the bottom of the ocean? That's the question of Umwelt. Humans can try to imagine what it's like to see the world as a mantis shrimp, for example, but Young says fundamentally you can never know, simply because the other animal, the other organism is so different, so neurologically, so physiologically, so anatomically different, that it is impossible to know what their experience is like, or to know what a mantis shrimp actually sees. It reminds me of that cliche conversation of people when they get way too tired or other things, and they start to, get really deep in conversation, and one turns to another and says, "How do I know that the red that I see is the same color that you see?" I think it's much more interesting to ask, how do I know that the photoreceptors that I have in my eye are the same as the 4 times as many that the mantis shrimp has? Cookie never talked to me about her photoreceptors. But she seemed to be able to have a perception of reality that I didn't. Like most people with animals can tell you, she seemed to be able to tell when I was having a particularly difficult day. When I had been reading news articles about the war in Ukraine, terrible acts of violence committed in schools, houses of worship, parades. Cookie seemed to be able to perceive that what I needed most in those moments was to be kind to another living thing. And she'd hop in my lap and ask for pets. In a world full of cruelty, there is still power in every act of kindness. The universe is not subtle. Keith and I mourned Cookie's loss for several days. We were stuck at home with nothing to do, sitting at home in our sorrow, feeling really sorry for ourselves with all the coulda, shoulda, wouldas of what we could have done differently, should have done differently, would have done differently if we had known what was coming. And we decided that we wanted to wait a couple weeks to get a new cat, out of respect for Cookie. That Sunday, we decided to attend church. The offering that Sunday went to feral feline friends. They had guest speakers, y'all. And those guest speakers brought in pet carriers that they set on the altar and were moving around while they were telling about their organization. And then they reached into the pet carrier and pulled out Bubbles and told Bubbles' horrible and tragic backstory, but how wonderful it was that now Bubbles had a good home. They pulled out Samantha, and they talked about how Samantha was one of 7, and that she was the only surviving member, and now she was going to have a good home. And they kept bringing out cat after cat after cat. And I don't know if it actually happened this way. I could go back and look at the tape if I wanted to, but I swear at one point, the person who was speaking held up a cat and said, "And cats just like this need your help." And they zoomed in on Bubbles, and Bubbles went, meow. Long story short, Keith and I went to the PetSmart where they were holding an adoption fair that afternoon just to look. And I see we have some pet owners and people who are familiar with pet owners. We are now the proud parents of 2 cats, not just 1, 2 cats. When we said we would even wait to adopt 1, we now are the proud parents of Memphis and Henry. In a world full of cruelty, there is still power in every act of kindness. In all of these examples, my stay in the hospital, Cookie's passing, I found myself guilty of what my husband had accused me of, taking the responsibility for the things outside my control. If only I coulda, maybe I shoulda, then things woulda. If only I had worn my mask extra good when I went to the grocery store. If only I had taken Cookie to the vet for her checkup sooner. My head spins with the possibility, with the thoughts of all the things that I could have done, that they don't let me see the sum, the beautiful things that come from these experiences. The beauty of finding a heartbeat in a meditation on Sunday morning, the memory of a big floofy cat who made me more human. I'm here to tell you this morning that there are days when the sum is good enough. The sum that you can do, the sum that you can see is good enough. With these 2 recent experiences still very fresh for me, the lessons extend into other aspects of life as well. As we're all aware, the world is on fire, in some places quite literally. War rages in Europe. Millions of people have had their rights to reproductive health care stripped away. Lives lost to gun violence tick even higher. Income inequality worsens. Black lives continue to be lost at the hands of police. Trans lives continue to be under attack and have their humanity denied. Queer represented books are banned, and the list goes on, and you probably thought of a couple just now as I was talking and listening, and if you're like me, your heart rate is racing higher and higher in this moment. How can we possibly know where to begin? I think wrapped up in that question is the assumption that it is our responsibility to fix it all. How can we possibly know where to begin with all of it? We ignore the more practical question of where can we begin with some of it. We can't let the fear of all we can't do be the enemy of the some that we can. There is still power in every act of unity. We don't need to single-handedly reinvent the wheel. There are tons of grassroots organizations out there working right now with every single one of those issues that I mentioned and the ones you thought of. Just like in our story this morning, there are 1,000 different ways to say something, and sometimes it's as simple as showing up. Whether that's at your breakfast table and taking care of yourself, or showing up to staff a phone bank, agreeing to be home hospitality for someone who is coming in from out of state, a state like Tennessee to a state like Illinois, hint, hint, who might need a place to stay to access safe, life-saving, legal health care. You don't need to be willing to do everything. You can show up and do something. As the poet reminds us, the work of the world is common as mud. The pitcher cries for water to carry, and a person for work that is real. As we all feel this call this morning, may we realize the sum that we can do, so that together we all can do something. May it be so.
No, it's me, sorry. I even have it highlighted in yellow. As we extinguish the chalice, please join in saying the words on the screen by Reverend Elizabeth Sella Jones. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry hearts until we are together again. Please rise in body or spirit and join singing our closing hymn, number 6, Just as Long as I Have Breath.
Every Sunday at Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist Church, the ministers dismiss the congregation by saying the following words. I share it with you this morning. Prophetic Church, the world awaits our liberating ministry. We go forward in the power of love. We proclaim the truth that makes us free.
I feel like